Welcome to another episode of PPL Pod. Usually when we talk about the biggest pop acts in history, the story is, it's pretty straightforward.
Right, very predictable.
Exactly. Like
Yeah.
a group gets discovered, they sign some terribly restrictive contract, they sing whatever songs they're handed, and they just ride the wave until the label decides they're done. It's a very neat, highly corporate machine.
Yeah, and it's a machine built entirely on predictability because, the music industry historically just loves a formula to minimize risk.
Right. But then you look at the mid-1990s, and suddenly that incredibly predictable machine gets completely hijacked.
Oh.
Because this group of 5 young women didn't just top the charts, they quite literally staged a heist.
Multiple heists, actually.
Yeah. They stole their own master tapes, they systematically fired their powerful managers, and, almost by accident, they wrote the entire blueprint for modern celebrity culture.
It is arguably one of the most fascinating acts of corporate rebellion in music history.
Yeah.
And it was just hiding right there in plain sight behind, platform shoes, pigtails, and these incredibly catchy choruses.
So today we are doing a deep dive into the Spice Girls. We're unpacking a group that sold over 100 million records, making them the best-selling girl group of all time.
Which is just a staggering number.
It really is. But for you listening, whether you're a diehard fan who still has the dolls in their original packaging, or maybe you just casually mumble the fast part of Wannabe at karaoke, this isn't just a story about a 90s pop band.
No, definitely not.
It's a story about women who took a highly manufactured, deeply cynical corporate concept and just went completely rogue.
And why this specific story matters today is that regardless of how you personally feel about bubblegum pop, the Spice Girls completely disrupted a heavily male-dominated industry.
Oh, entirely.
They pioneered the kind of intense brand synergy, the paparazzi decoy tactics, and honestly, the influencer-style marketing that essentially defines how every modern celebrity operates today.
So to really understand how radical this was, we have to look at what they were up against. Let's set the scene. It's 1994 in the UK. If you turn on the radio, what is the actual landscape? Because my memory is just a wall of Britpop and guys in parkas.
Yeah, I mean, your memory is spot on. In 1994, the UK charts were totally dominated by boys with guitars and boys singing ballads.
Right.
You had the massive rise of Britpop, so bands like Oasis and Blur. And in the pop sphere, you had hugely successful boy bands like Take That and Need 17.
Okay, so where are the women in this ecosystem?
Mostly sidelined, I mean, at least in terms of groups. And the industry's conventional wisdom at the time was actually quite rigid about this.
Yeah.
Record executives truly believed that an all-girl pop group would simply fail.
Wait, why? That sounds completely counterintuitive. Like half the population is female.
I know, right? The logic, flawed as it was that the primary consumers of pop singles were young girls. So the executives believed that these young female fans wouldn't buy records from an all-girl group because they'd be jealous of them.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and they assumed young boys wouldn't buy the records because a group of confident women would be perceived as, quote, too threatening.
Too threatening. I love that. So the industry is essentially just terrified of confident women.
Pretty much.
Enter this father and son management duo, Bob and Chris Herbert of Heart Management. They look at this landscape, see the massive financial success of boy bands, and they think, well, there's an untapped market here. We need a female response.
Right. They saw a gap in the market.
Yeah, so they do what any good corporate entity does. They put out a literal want ad.
Exactly.
Yeah.
In February 1994, they placed an advertisement in the trade paper The Stage. They were seeking 5 strikingly different girls. They wanted a choreographed, singing and dancing, all-female pop act.
It's basically an open casting call for a reality TV show, years before reality TV even existed. Or, like a corporate team draft. So 400 women show up to Dancework Studios in London on March 4th.
Right.
And from that 400, management slowly whittles it down to a 5-piece group they originally called Touch. But the lineup we know today wasn't actually the original draft pick, was it?
Not entirely, no. The assembly was a very fluid, almost chaotic process. For instance, Melanie Chisholm, who we all know as Mel C, she actually missed the second round of auditions because she came down with tonsillitis.
Which usually means you're out in these ruthless casting calls, like your chance is gone.
Usually, yes. But after that round, management just wasn't completely satisfied, so they let go of a girl named Melanie Coloma and decided to bring Mel C back in to replace her.
Oh, lucky break.
Yeah, and then there's Michelle Stevenson, she part of the original 5, but she was let go a few months into the rigorous training process for what management perceived as a lack of commitment.
Right, and the way they replaced her is so revealing about how manufactured this whole thing was. They literally just went to the group's vocal coach,
Hmm.
a woman named Peppy Lemmer, and asked for a recommendation.
Yep.
And that is how Emma Bunton got the job.
Precisely. And perhaps the most telling origin story belongs to Gary Halliwell. She completely missed the very first audition,
Completely missed it.
but she managed to talk her way into the subsequent rounds through just sheer force of personality and persuasion.
Which is so completely on brand for her.
Yeah.
Okay, so Heart Management finally has their 5. They put these women in a 3-bedroom house in Maidenhead.
Right. Very close quarters.
Yeah, they're living together, constantly practicing dance routines and singing demo songs that were written by middle-aged men for a much younger audience. When you look at the mechanics of it, it is the absolute definition of a manufactured corporate pop setup.
It was highly controlled.
Yeah.
They were essentially entry-level employees being molded to fit a very specific demographic target. They didn't even have an official finalized contract yet.
Wow, just verbal agreements.
Just a lot of verbal promises and very tight, almost suffocating supervision.
But this is where the story shifts and where that corporate machine starts to break down. You've got this manufactured group touch, but the women in the house are starting to get deeply frustrated.
Yeah, the songs didn't fit them at all.
Exactly. And management isn't listening to their input on wardrobe or musical direction. So they stubbornly refuse to sign the restrictive contracts their managers finally offer them. And they actually start taking legal advice from, among others, Victoria's father.
That refusal to sign is critical. You can really see the shift from passive participants to active creators there. They realized they were the product, yes, but they decided they wanted to be the CEOs of that product.
Right.
They even started taking professional songwriting lessons on their own and co-wrote a track called Sugar and Spice, which ultimately prompted them to change their name to simply Spice.
But if you're unhappy with your boss, normally you just quit. But in the music industry, it's not that simple, is it? Which brings us to March 1995, the great master tape heist.
This is such a wild moment.
I need you to explain the mechanics of this, because I don't think most people realize why this was so necessary. Like, if they wrote the songs, why couldn't they just walk out the door and sing them somewhere else?
Well, it's because of how intellectual property works in the music business. Even if you write the lyrics and the melody, the physical master recordings, so the actual studio tapes containing the high-quality vocal and instrumental tracks, are usually owned by whoever paid for the studio time.
Ah, okay.
And in this case, Heart Management physically held those tapes.
So to use an analogy, it's like they spent a year building a beautiful house, but the management company holds the only deed. If they just walk away, management keeps the house, gives it to 5 other girls, and the original group is left with nothing.
Exactly. The master recordings were their only tangible leverage. They literally couldn't shop their sound to other record labels without them. So they realized they had to steal the deed.
I love this part.
Gary Halliwell executes this rather brilliant plan.
Yeah.
She tricks one of their producers into handing over the master tapes by casually claiming the group just needed them to practice a dance routine over the weekend.
She literally just put the heavy physical tapes in her bag, and all 5 of them walked out of the management offices and never came back. They stole their own intellectual property.
Yeah, they really did.
I mean, I have to stop and ask here, how often does a corporate-created pop group go rogue, stage a heist of their own music, and then successfully shop it to a major label on their own terms?
Almost never. I mean, it's incredibly rare in the music industry for a manufactured act to seize the means of production like that, especially before they even have a record deal.
Right.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, this real-life rebellion was the actual authentic birth of their girl power ethos.
Right. It wasn't just like a marketing slogan they sang.
No, not at all. It was a ruthless business strategy they executed. They completely defied the man who created them to take control of their own destiny. They took the tapes, tracked down the producers they actually wanted to work with, like Elliot Kennedy and the Absolute production team, and eventually signed with a new manager, Simon Fuller.
And they secured a massive deal with Virgin Records. Plus, they added girls to their name because, funny enough, a rapper was already using Spice. So the Spice Girls were officially born.
Exactly.
And their timing couldn't have been better because July 1996 arrives and Wannabe drops. And it doesn't just do well, it obliterates the global charts.
It was everywhere.
It hits #1 in 37 different countries. It becomes the best-selling single by an all-female group in history. It is an absolute cultural earthquake.
Definitely.
But as the fame skyrockets, they run into a massive media problem. Like, how do you handle that level of omnipresent, suffocating press.
Well, you give them a decoy. Because they were so ubiquitous, the press just needed a quick, easy way to categorize them. And that brings us to the nicknames: Scary, Sporty, Baby, Ginger, and Posh.
Now, hold on. If you were a kid in the 90s, you knew exactly who you were in your friend group based on these names.
Oh, absolutely.
And for decades, I totally assumed some high-paid marketing executive in a high-rise boardroom focus grouped those names for months to maximize global market penetration.
It's a very common assumption, and, logically it makes sense given how perfectly the names functioned as a branding tool. But the reality is completely different.
Right.
The nicknames were actually invented as a joke over lunch by Peter Lorraine and the editorial staff of a British teen magazine called Top of the Pops.
Wait, an editorial team just made them up on a whim?
Yes?
They just thought Victoria looked pouty in a designer dress, so she's posh. Mel B was loud and wore leopard print, so she's scary. Emma had pigtails, so baby. It's just silly, lazy magazine shorthand.
It really was.
Yeah.
But the genius was in how the group adopted them. Mel C later described those nicknames and the exaggerated personas as a protection mechanism.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, when you're facing that level of unprecedented fame where paparazzi are quite literally digging through your trash, having a caricature to hide behind becomes a form of psychological armor.
That makes so much sense. By feeding the media a two-dimensional cartoon character, like, oh, I'm just posh, I don't smile, you satisfy the press's need for a soundbite while keeping your actual three-dimensional self somewhat private.
Exactly.
I always compare it to a superhero squad, like the Avengers, or honestly, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. You have this unified team, but every single character has a very specific color palette, a specific personality, a specific attitude.
And critically, it completely rejected the old industry idea that a girl group had to be a homogeneous block of women wearing matching sequin dresses, doing synchronized swaying, like the Supremes in the 1960s. It celebrated intense individuality within a collective.
But there is a downside to that superhero armor, right? Because their visual image was so loud and their merchandising was so aggressive, a lot of music critics at the time looked at the nicknames and completely dismissed them.
Yeah, they were written off as a shallow, plastic marketing tactic with zero musical substance. They were heavily criticized for not playing instruments, which is, a very traditional rock-centric view of what constitutes real artistry.
Right, but the sources show a very different reality behind the scenes regarding how they constructed their music. First, they co-wrote every single one of their songs.
They did.
And second, their vocal arrangement was highly intentional and deeply egalitarian.
Yeah, going back to that comparison with the Supremes where you had Diana Ross as the clear lead singer and the others strictly relegated to backing vocals, the Spice Girls actively rejected that hierarchy.
How so?
Well, they shared vocal duties equally. Every song was systematically divided up so that each member got one or two solo lines to establish their persona before all five of them harmonized powerfully in the chorus.
So no one voice was ever allowed to dominate the track? And what completely blew my mind in the research is that this equality wasn't just a nice idea in the vocal booth, it was written into their legal contracts.
Yes, it was.
They negotiated a strict 50-50 split on all songwriting royalties among the five of them, plus their co-writers.
And we really need to pause on how extraordinary that is.
Right, because I want to challenge this. In any creative project, someone always does more work. You're saying they split all writing royalties equally, even if one person just sat on a couch eating chips while someone else wrote the entire bridge and the chorus.
That is exactly what I'm saying. And, from a pure effort perspective, it might sound unfair. But from a business preservation perspective, it was an absolute masterstroke. Think about why bands usually break up.
Usually it's resentment. Like the lead singer who wrote the hits buys a mansion, and the drummer who didn't get writing credit goes broke.
Exactly. Royalty disputes tear bands apart constantly. By agreeing to a flat five-way split from day one, regardless of individual contribution to a specific track, they legally neutralized the primary financial incentive for internal betrayal. That 50-50 split was the ultimate symbolic and literal expression of their unity. It proved that their girl power manifesto of sisterhood wasn't just an empty lyric. It was legally binding in their corporate contracts.
And speaking of the lyrics, they were actually sneaking some pretty subversive messaging into the music. Like, we remember them as bubblegum pop, but look at the song, Say You'll Be There.
Yeah, a great example.
It completely inverts the gender roles you usually heard in pop music. It portrays an overly emotional, dependent man and a woman who is independent and completely in control of their relationship boundaries. Or Two Become One, which is this gorgeous, slow ballad that explicitly promotes safe sex.
Right. They were taking rather mature, feminist, and sex-positive messages and packaging them for tweens and teenagers. They were essentially telling young girls to be active participants in their lives, not passive objects of affection, to value their friendships over romantic entanglement.
But what happens when that messaging becomes so popular that the machine starts moving too fast? Because by 1997, Spice Mania is completely out of control. They are a massive global phenomenon.
Unstoppable.
You have Geri Halliwell walking out at the Brit Awards in that iconic Union Jack mini dress, which basically becomes the defining image of the entire Cool Britannia era.
They were at the absolute zenith of their cultural power, but behind the scenes, they were being massively overworked by the demands of their own empire.
It sounds genuinely exhausting just reading the timeline. In 1997, they are filming a feature-length movie, Spice World, while simultaneously writing and recording their second album on the set of the film.
Yeah, they were literally writing songs in their trailers between takes.
Yeah.
The song stopped from that album. It was quite literally written about their desperate frustration with how hard their management was pushing them.
And that push was largely driven by commercial endorsements, right?
Yeah.
Under their manager, Simon Fuller, they signed over 20 major sponsorship deals in a shockingly short period.
It was unprecedented.
Pepsi, Polaroid, Walker's Crisps, Chupa Chups lollipops. You couldn't walk into a supermarket anywhere in the world without seeing their faces. Those deals generated an estimated $500 to $800 million.
But the cost was intense overexposure and complete physical exhaustion, which leads to another legendary moment of rebellion.
Right.
It's November 1997. It is the morning of the MTV Europe Music Awards. They are set to perform live in front of millions of people. And what do?
They suddenly fire their manager, Simon Fuller. Just, you're out. We manage ourselves now.
It was a deeply shocking move to the industry. Many executives assumed Fuller was the mastermind, the puppet master pulling the strings of these 5 women.
Yeah.
But the group felt they were losing their agency again, becoming exhausted cogs in a machine they no longer controlled, just like they had with Heart Management. So they cut him loose.
But if you fire the guy who runs your entire multi-million-dollar empire, how do you actually keep the business running? You stage another heist. The sources detail that Geri Halliwell supposedly stole a physical Filofax, a leather-bound daily planner from Simon Fuller's assistant.
Which is just an incredible detail.
It's insane. She just took it so the band would have all the direct phone numbers and corporate business contacts they needed. To use an analogy, Simon Fuller was the operating system of the Spice Girls empire.
Right.
When they fired him, they essentially deleted their OS, so they had to manually code a new one on the fly using a stolen Rolodex. I can just picture her sneaking out with this planner full of the world's biggest corporate contacts.
It speaks to their incredible audacity, but it also highlights the sheer chaos behind the scenes. I mean, they were essentially a medium-sized multinational corporation at this point.
Totally.
And they were trying to run it themselves while simultaneously being the most famous women on the planet. And ultimately, that pressure cooker environment led to the ultimate fracture.
Right. The engine finally gives out. May 1998. The unthinkable happens. Geri Halliwell Ginger Spice, the one who stole the master tapes, the one who stole the Filofax, the one many saw as the unofficial leader, leaves the band entirely.
She cited creative differences and, crucially, extreme exhaustion.
Yeah.
The news was an international event. It made global front-page headlines. It was a massive shock to the system of pop culture, and it really signaled the beginning of the end of their peak imperial phase, even though the remaining 4 members did continue on a highly successful world tour without her.
So the burning supernova of the Spice Girls only really lasted as a 5-piece from 1996 to 1998, just 2 years.
Just 2 years.
But the blast radius of that explosion changed everything. Let's dig into the legacy of girl power.
If we look at their impact on the broader picture of the music industry, it's almost immeasurable. First, on a purely economic and musical level, they are widely credited with breaking the grunge and Britpop dominance of the early 90s, really paving the way for the massive late 90s teen pop boom.
Right.
Without the Spice Girls proving to the industry the staggering economic power of young female fans, it is highly unlikely you get the subsequent record label investments that launched NSYNC, the Backstreet Boys, or Britney Spears.
And their influence on future artists is wild. Like, we're not just talking about paving the way for other girl groups. You have massive artists like Adele, who famously said the Spice Girls made her who she is today.
Oh, absolutely.
Beyoncé told Victoria Beckham how much the group inspired her own work. Billie Eilish, Charlie XCX, they all point back to the Spice Girls as this pivotal, empowering influence.
And culturally, they mainstreamed the concept of girl power. Now, important to add some nuance here. They didn't invent the phrase.
Right, they didn't.
It was actually coined in 1991 by the U.S. punk band Bikini Kill, and the Spice Girls likely picked it up from a 1996 song by the British indie pop duo Shampoo. But the Spice Girls are the ones who weaponized it for the global mainstream.
They took a niche punk feminist concept, stripped it of its most radical, alienating politics to make it broadly palatable, and then broadcast it to millions of preteens who had, never heard of the Riot Girl movement.
Precisely. And you still see their footprint in how modern celebrities operate as businesses today.
Yeah.
They didn't just sell music. They sold a lifestyle, an identity, an attitude.
The pop brand synergy.
Yes.
They treated the band as a brand in a way that had never quite been done before. When you see pop stars or mega influencers today seamlessly integrating sponsorships, creating lifestyle brands, and tightly managing their distinct public personas, they are basically operating from the playbook the Spice Girls wrote with a stolen Filofax in 1997.
And it's a playbook with incredible staying power. Every time they return to the public eye, it's a massive event. I mean, their 2007 to 2008 reunion tour was the highest grossing concert act of the entire year.
Oh, wow.
And we cannot forget the 2012 London Olympics closing ceremony.
Oh, that was legendary. They rolled out into the stadium in those light-up black cabs, performed a medley, and it instantly became the most tweeted moment of the entire games. Over 116,000 tweets per minute.
It really proves that their cultural resonance goes far beyond simple 90s nostalgia.
Yeah.
They occupy a very unique, permanent space in the cultural consciousness because they fundamentally changed how we interact with pop stars.
Okay, bringing this all back to where we started. We set this up as a story of a corporate machine getting hijacked. And I think that is the ultimate fascinating contradiction of the Spice Girls.
Definitely.
They were originally assembled by a group of men specifically designed to appeal to a male-dominated industry that didn't believe young girls could carry a pop act. But instead, these 5 women took the project, went entirely rogue, stole their own music, explicitly targeted a young female fan base, and broadcast this incredibly loud, boisterous, sex-positive message of female solidarity.
It's a paradox that cultural commentators still debate today.
Which leaves us with this final thought for you listening to Ponder today. When you look back at that Union Jack dress, the superhero nicknames, and the absolute mountain of Pepsi and Polaroid merchandise, were the Spice Girls simply the ultimate highly profitable product of 90s commercial capitalism? Or were they the ultimate Trojan horse?
That's the real question.
Did they deliberately use the slick, predictable corporate machinery of the pop industry to sneak a radical, enduring message of independence and sisterhood into the minds of millions of young girls around the world?
You know, it's a question that entirely depends on what angle you view them from. And maybe that's exactly why we're still doing deep dives into their legacy today.
Thanks for listening to People Pod. Keep tuning in for more stories worth knowing.